All right, just kind of real quick here with the making of the Russian Empire. One, we have a very small Russian state being centered on Moscow that begins to emerge around about 1500. Now, the thing is, and I need you to put a note here next to this unlabeled sentence, and it's kind of a medium-sized note, so you might want to run it down the side here. We won't have another note here for a couple minutes. But you want to put down again, right about here, do you want to put, please, here, that the expansion is similar to what was going on in other places. The expansion was similar to what was going on in other places, with two exceptions. With two exceptions. One, this was quote unquote local expansion. This was quote unquote local expansion. And second, it was done after the Mongols were gone. It was done after the Mongols were gone. And this is going to make the building of the Russian Empire a little unique, that they are kicking out one empire in order to build their own. But around about 1500, Moscow begins to conquer some of the neighboring cities. This is why the expansion is local, because again, they're going and they're beating up their neighbors, and pretty much everybody else, with the exception of the Europeans, is doing this. Early expansion of the grasslands to the south and to the east is for security against the nomads. Even though the Mongols have left, you still have nomadic groups that are basically causing problems for some of the settlers that are going into the grasslands to establish farming communities there. So the empire, the state that is being created in Moscow, starts to go into those exact same grasslands in an attempt to bring those nomads under control, to create a far more safe environment for the agricultural expansion that's going on there. We also have these guys going into Siberia as well, and this is just simply for a matter of opportunity. What you'll see here in a couple chapters is that there's going to be a period of global cooling, and fur, especially high quality fur, is going to be amazingly sought after. You'll see it's going to be one of the reasons why the English, the French, and the Dutch go into North America, and it's going to be the reason why the Russians go into Siberia. Siberia is known for its unbelievably cold and inhospitable weather, so if the animals are able to survive there, their fur is going to be absolutely amazing. So the conquest, in like a lot of these other places, especially with Europe, is made possible by modern weapons and organization. The places, just like with the Europeans going into the Aztec and the Incan Empire and the Americans in general, those people that they're conquering just simply don't have the military technology or the overwhelming organization that the Europeans have. Same thing here with the Russians. They're going after some nomads. They're also going after Siberian communities that are incredibly isolated and just simply do not have the same level of development technologically or organizationally that the Russians end up having here either. Conquest, of course, is going to bring devastating epidemics, especially in the remote areas of Siberia. Because of the nature of Siberia, because of its remote location, because of its weather the vast majority of the year, even though Siberia is a next-door neighbor to Russia, their people still don't have immunities to those kind of Eurasian-based diseases. Because they're remote, and also because of the nature of where they are, they just simply don't have the exact same type of farm animals that the Russians or the Europeans would. So just like with the indigenous population of the Americas, they're going to succumb to smallpox and measles. Again, just like the Europeans in North America, they're going to put pressure to convert to Christianity. Where in the Americas, it's going to be Catholicism. With Russia, it's going to be Eastern Orthodoxy. They will also discourage pastoralism. Again, remember, the pastoralists are just simply another version of the nomads. And since the Russians came into the area to try to restore order from the nomads, the last thing they want to do is to have another group of nomads coming in. And on top of this, many of the natives are also Russified. And I want to define this for you. So you want to draw a line under Russified and then put an arrow over to the side. I don't care if you go on this side or you end up going over here on the right, but you want to put down here for Russified that this is forced adoption. This is forced adoption of Russian language, culture, religion, and traditions. This is the forced adoption of Russian language, culture, religion, and traditions. And then also add to that they also had to swear an allegiance. They also had to swear an allegiance to the Tsar, Tsar, it's the Russian king or the Russian emperor, to the Tsar, Tsar, and pay tribute. And pay tribute. Now, with the creation of the Russian Empire, there are a couple unique things that are going on here. And the first one here, again, make sure you're highlighting what I'm highlighting. With imperial expansion, Russians became a smaller portion of the overall population. So uniquely, with this empire that they're building very locally, their empire really is one of the few Eurasian-based empires that is multicultural, that's multi-ethnic, that technically, depending on what we're talking about, it will also be interfaith as well. There will be multiple faiths being practiced within the empire. And we don't necessarily see this in a lot of other places, especially with the type of local expansion that the Russians are doing. The rich agricultural lands, fur, and minerals helped to make Russia a great power by the 18th century. Now, this is going to be kind of relative, and you're going to see the Russians being on top of their game, and the Russians, to be quite honest with you, being a little bit of a joke. I mean, definitely on the struggle bus and running behind the Western European powers. And part of this weird situation with the Russians of never necessarily quite being able to completely and totally catch up with the Europeans is the fact that they have a long-term identity problem. I mean, this is going to be really kind of weird to mention, and we're going to have to put a bigger note right here next to number 4 underneath capital B to kind of explain it. But you want to put here, please, that this is a question about their identity. This is a question about their identity. Are they a European country? Are they a European country? But they didn't quite fit. But they didn't quite fit because they were backwards. Because they were backwards. Or are they an Asian country? Or are they an Asian country? So, a couple problems that Russia has. One is its size. It's absolutely enormous. And until historically, relatively recently, being able to control all parts of Russia from a centralized point in the west rather, becomes really difficult. So there's going to be parts of Russia that are going to be very, very lawless. And I'll help to kind of explain later on the type of government that the Russians are going to gravitate to, whether it's under the empire or whether it's under the communist dictatorship of like Lenin, Stalin, those guys, or whatever. But their big problem here is that technically they span both the European continent and also the Asian continent because of their size, because of the fact that they had been dominated by an Eastern empire with the Mongols for so long. They don't necessarily quite fit with the whole Western European mold. And even though they'll decide to try to go to the West and become as European as possible under the leadership of Peter the Great, they won't necessarily quite fit the mold, and they're kind of constantly playing catch up, and they don't necessarily quite ever, get there and stay there for very long. Or are they an Asian empire? But the problem is that they also don't fit that either, because if you look at the Asian empires, the Chinese empires, or the Mughal Empire in India, they don't necessarily quite fit that either. Unfortunately for them in their development, they decide to gravitate towards the West and are always going to be kind of like a younger sibling desperately trying to keep up. Where if they would have gravitated towards the East, yeah, they would have been behind the eight ball a little bit with the Chinese Ming Dynasty, but that dynasty was not going to last as long as the Russian Empire. So perhaps had they gravitated towards the East, they may have become more of a dominant world power rather than sort of kind of just this fleeting one that they ended up being, or this complicated empire. That's probably a better way to look at it. Now, even though these guys are colonizing, and there are some similarities that they do have with what's going on within the Americas, the colonization experience, of course, is different. The conquest of territories is ones with which Russia had long interacted. Again, they're beating up their next door neighbors, where the Europeans are going across the ocean and finding people to beat the living crap out of. The other unique thing, and this really causes them to stand apart and also might go and help to explain some of the difficulties that they have later, is that conquest takes place at the same time as the development of the Russian state. So not only are these guys expanding and conquering new territory and building their empire, but they're also trying to get their own crap together. I mean, because remember, the Mongols have only just left. So they're trying to recover after the Mongolian episode and expand at the same time. So they're doing two very, very complex contests at the exact same time, and it's going to lead them definitely to some problems. The other really unique thing is that technically the Russian Empire remains intact until 1991. Okay, we will rename it. It will become the USSR, but it essentially is the exact same landmass that the Russian Empire had been from the 1500s on up. And because these three categories are so unique, you want to put a big star here by A, B, and C underneath number 5 to make sure it sticks out a little bit for you.